come out of this class and have things to share with people about, do you know how many bombs we blew up inside this country? Do you know how much contamination there is here? Do you know what the corporations have been doing for the last 30 years and how polluted our whole countryside is? If most people don't know that, then they could care less about all this eco stuff. Because who cares? It doesn't really matter. It's all just sort of a matter of opinion, right? It's not a matter of opinion, though, when we talk about how much of our air is polluted to where we shouldn't be breathing in, how much of our water is polluted to where we shouldn't be drinking in or swimming in, how much of our food is so toxic that we shouldn't even be ingesting it, and how much of our economy is fundamentally grounded in something that's based in destruction and exploitation. So when we have those types of legacies, then we realize that also just little baby steps are significant and are a good idea. This is why another concern I have is that oftentimes when people approach ecological issues, they approach it from an idealistic viewpoint. And they tend to think, for instance, if I can't do this 100%, I don't want to do it at all. If I can't do the eco thing totally, then what's the point? Right? I mean, I'm sure some of you have heard that. We've all heard that. People say that. They're like, well, I started doing that thing with getting my own water and not using bottled water, but I just decided it wasn't really making a big difference. So I'm back to bottled water. And whatever it is, every little baby step thing, we tend to kind of dumb it down into, oh, this actually isn't relevant because I'm not doing the eco thing 100%. So if I'm not buying all my food locally and biking to work and making all my own clothes and making all my own tinctures and using an outhouse and composting and, if I'm not doing all of it, then why should I just compost? Why should I just bike? So anything and everything is kind of where I'm coming from with it, because I guess I'm coming from this perspective of there's nowhere to go but up, right? Really, it's like I wish I had another sort of story to bring to you, but honestly, from the research I've done, it's like, wow, the scale of what's going on right now with this species and its potential to destabilize what we actually come from is so grievously dangerous that it's something you have to be cynical and have levity about, and also to be a research hound to really know about it. Because part of why I say this is not so much that this is individual gratification that you're getting from doing the research. It's what's going on right here under your feet? Is there a Superfund site? Is there a coal burning plant? Is there a toxic waste incinerator? What's going on? Because in the United States, there is a synergy of industrial contamination dropping down on just about every single place on the land. And so if you're not cognizant of that, then you don't really understand what you're up against. You don't really understand that fundamentally we've got a whole way of doing things that has to change, in addition to us beginning to demonstrate and practice now living healthier lives for ourselves. Part of why that's so essential is because of this inundation. Because part of what you're doing is fortifying yourself. So in the midst of a world that thinks it's fine to inundate you with carcinogens, teratogens, mutagens, and endocrine disruptors, you need to fortify yourself. Because this regulatory model that we have in this country uses terms like acceptable level of exposure. Right? So there's an acceptable amount of carcinogen in your cereal, an acceptable amount of mutagen in your drinking water, an acceptable amount of endocrine disruptor coming from your PVC piping into your water. Right? So, acceptable amount. However, what acceptable level of exposure doesn't talk about is how about the synergistic interaction between a carcinogen and an endocrine disruptor, which the National Academy of Sciences has shown to be upwards of 10-fold. In other words, if you've ingested water that has endocrine disruptors in it, which, by the way, is probably one of the most ubiquitous widespread pollutants, and it's one that's a byproduct of making all organochlorines. Organochlorines are the base of all hydrocarbon chains, so in other words, all the plastics that are made create dioxins as a byproduct. Dioxin is an endocrine disruptor. Dioxin is a term for over 200 different chemicals. The EPA's own studies show that there's no acceptable level of exposure that can be maintained by any of the manufacturing industries, because dioxins have been found to be toxic to parts per trillion, which means if I have a 1 million gallon tank of liquid and I put one drop of water in it, and I gave that water to a rat, it is very likely to get cancer from it. That's what parts per trillion means. So when parts per trillion is being used as a criteria for acceptable level of exposure, it's completely, they can't even conceive of it, because our regulatory model is based on parts per million.